Why is your neighbor's 30-year-old Toyota still running perfectly while that 3-year-old luxury SUV is already on its third transmission? What did Japanese engineers know in 1990 that modern automakers have conveniently forgotten? The answer is simple. They were too good at their jobs. Today we're counting down 9 old JDM cars that were built to last forever. Number 9, Toyota Camry XV10. When Toyota launched the XV10 Camry in 1991, they weren't trying to win design awards or break lap records. They had one goal: build a car so mechanically sound that it would still be running when the owner's kids inherited it. And honestly, they overshot the target by about 200,000 miles. The secret was Toyota's obsessive approach to what they called quality circles. Engineers would literally sit in rooms for hours debating the optimal thickness of a door seal, or whether a switch should click 50,000 times or 100,000 times before failing. Most automakers would call this insanity. Toyota called it a Tuesday. Under the hood, the 5S4 cylinder and the 1MZ V6 were engineered like they were going into tanks, not family sedans. These engines were so under stress that highway cruising was basically a warm-up exercise. The timing belt? Yeah, you had to change it, but if you forgot, the engine wouldn't grenade itself out of spite like so many interference engines love to do. The transmission was built with enough redundancy to make aerospace engineers nod in approval. Fluid changes every 60,000 miles, and these things would shift smoothly past 500,000 miles. There are documented cases of taxi drivers in the Middle East running original transmissions past 600,000 miles with nothing but routine maintenance. But here's where the Camry truly earned its immortality badge: simplicity. No complicated all-wheel drive systems, no turbos waiting to grenade, no fancy electronics that turn into expensive paperweights after 10 years. Just straightforward engineering executed perfectly. Today, finding a clean XV10 Camry is like finding a time capsule of when Toyota's entire corporate philosophy was build it right, build it once, and make sure it outlives the warranty by several geologic eras. And the craziest part? Many owners report these cars actually get more reliable with age, as if breaking in the first 100,000 miles was just foreplay. Number 8. Mazda MX5 Miata NA. When Mazda launched the Miata in 1989, the concept was laughably simple. Take the spirit of classic British roadsters like the MG and Triumph, but remove everything that made British cars electrical nightmares. The result was a lightweight sports car that did something revolutionary for the segment. It started every single time you turned the key. Revolutionary stuff, apparently. The 1.6-liter and later 1.8-liter inline-4 engines were masterclasses in simplicity. No turbo, no variable valve timing initially, no complications, just a straightforward 4-cylinder that loved to rev and refused to brake. These engines were so bulletproof that the biggest maintenance item was remembering to change the oil. Do that and the engine would happily spin to redline for decades. But here's what made the NA Miata truly special. Mazda engineered it with the same obsessive attention to detail they'd give a flagship sedan. The manual transmission shifted like a rifle bolt. Smooth, precise, mechanical perfection. 30 years later, original gearboxes still snick through gears like they rolled off the line yesterday. The suspension geometry was lifted almost directly from the Lotus Elan, because why reinvent perfection? Double wishbones all around, perfectly balanced and built with components that laughed at track day abuse. Owners routinely report hitting 200,000 miles on original suspension bushings, while cars costing 5 times as much need rebuilds at 80,000. The aftermarket support is insane too, because these cars were built so well mechanically, there's an entire industry dedicated to keeping them alive. You can rebuild an NA Miata with nothing but basic hand tools, a weekend, and determination. Mechanics love them because everything is accessible, no special tools required, no proprietary diagnostic software, just straightforward Japanese engineering that assumes the person fixing it has a brain and opposable thumbs. Today, clean NA Miatas are appreciating classics, but here's the thing, even the rough ones are still running. You'll find them at track days, autocross events, and back road drives, still doing exactly what Mazda designed them to do 35 years ago. Pure, simple, reliable driving joy. Number 7, Nissan Patrol Y60. While Land Cruiser fanboys will fight you in the comments, there's another Japanese off-roader that's been quietly conquering the world's worst terrain for decades, the Nissan Patrol Y60. And in some parts of the world, it's actually more trusted than Toyota's offering. When Nissan designed the Y60 in the mid-1980s, they weren't messing around. This wasn't some lifestyle SUV for mall parking lots. This was a proper go-anywhere, survive-anything utility vehicle built for Australian outback ranchers, Middle Eastern desert crossings, and African safari operations where the nearest mechanic might be 500 miles of unpaved hell away. The TB42 inline-6 engine was agricultural in the best possible way, a massive 4.2-liter naturally aspirated six-cylinder that made adequate power and legendary torque. This engine was so under stress that redlining it felt like asking a bodybuilder to open a jar. It could do it, but why would you need to? But the real star was the TB48 inline-6 that came later, a 4.8-liter engine that produced power so smoothly you'd think it was running on clouds and premium fuel. These engines regularly hit 300,000 miles with nothing more than oil changes and the occasional valve adjustment. In Australia, where people actually use their four-wheel drives for, four-wheel driving, TB48 powered patrols are still working daily. The chassis was overbuilt to a degree that made engineers from other manufacturers question their life choices. Fully boxed frame, solid front and rear axles, and enough ground clearance to drive over most obstacles without noticing. The suspension could handle loads that would make modern crossovers file for workers' compensation. Nissan's approach to reliability was refreshingly simple. Use proven technology, make everything accessible, and build it strong enough that breaking it requires genuine effort. Here's what separated the Y60 from pretenders: simplicity. No complicated electronics, no air suspension to fail, no automatic locking differentials that unlock at the worst possible moment. Just mechanical diff locks, manual hubs on early models, and systems so straightforward that field repairs were actually possible. Today, these patrols are legends in places where vehicles actually have to work for a living. You'll find them in the Australian outback with 500,000 miles, in Middle Eastern deserts still hauling cargo, and across Africa being trusted with lives in places where vehicle failure isn't an inconvenience, it's genuinely dangerous. The Y60 proved that Nissan could build something just as immortal as Toyota, they just did it quieter. Number 6. Honda Civic EG. The 5th generation Civic might be the most important car Honda ever built, not because it was the fastest, but because it proved a compact car could be reliable, fun, and spawn an entire tuner subculture. Clean examples now sell for more than their original sticker price. Let that sink in. The EG came from peak Honda before bean counters took over and cost-cutting became religion. The D-Series and B-Series engines were bulletproof. The VTEC B16A made 160 naturally aspirated horsepower, revved to 8,000 RPM, and did it all day without complaint. Double wishbone suspension at all four corners in an economy car. This gave the Civic handling that embarrassed vehicles costing twice as much. At barely 2,300 pounds with near-perfect weight distribution, physics became a suggestion. The manual transmissions were machined perfection, cable-actuated shifters with zero slop, clutches lasting 150,000 miles of teenager abuse, synchros that refused to die. What made the EG legendary was simplicity meets precision. Everything accessible, no special tools, no proprietary diagnostics, just logical Honda engineering that assumed mechanics had functioning brains. Today, untouched EGs are unicorns. They've been modified into oblivion or driven to 300,000 miles. The survivors proved 90s Honda understood something modern automakers forgot. Build it right, make it fun, make it last. Number 5. Subaru Legacy first generation. When Subaru launched the Legacy in 1989, all-wheel drive was mostly reserved for trucks and luxury cars. Subaru looked at that convention and said, what if we put all-wheel drive in an affordable sedan and made it actually reliable? Radical thinking for the era. The EJ22 Boxer engine was Subaru's masterpiece, a 2.2-liter flat 4 that made adequate power and legendary reliability. This engine was so under stress that mechanical failure required genuine commitment to neglect. Head gasket issues? Not yet. That curse came with later generations. The EJ22 was the golden child, the engine that could run low on oil, overheat slightly, and still get you home without drama. Owners routinely reported 300,000 miles on original engines with nothing but oil changes and timing belt replacements. In Alaska, where vehicles face conditions that would make other cars file for early retirement, first-gen Legacies are still working daily. The transmission options were both solid. The 5-speed manual was agricultural but indestructible. The 4-speed automatic was slower than Continental Drift, but could survive abuse that would grenade modern CVTs in seconds. Subaru's build build quality was shockingly good for a brand most Americans had never heard of. The body was galvanized to resist rust, unusual for Japanese cars of the era. Panel gaps were tight, the interior materials felt durable, designed to survive New England winters and mountain rescue duty. The Legacy proved all-wheel drive didn't have to be complicated or fragile, just smart engineering, proven technology, and the Japanese obsession with things actually working. Number 4. Toyota Hilux 5th Generation. The 5th generation Hilux arrived in 1988, and Toyota's engineers had one simple directive: build a truck so indestructible that it could survive literal war zones. And they did. In conflicts across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, the Hilux became the unofficial vehicle of choice for everyone from humanitarian workers to people definitely not doing humanitarian work. The engine lineup was a greatest hits collection of Toyota's most bulletproof power plants. The 22R were carryovers from the previous generation, already proven to be nearly immortal. These engines made adequate power and refused to die even when neglect became an art form. Oil changes? Recommendations, not requirements apparently. But the real legend was the turbocharged diesel variants. The 2LT and later the 3L diesel engines were agricultural in the best possible way. They clattered like sewing machines filled with rocks, produced power measured in eventually, and could run on fuel that would make modern diesels throw error codes and stage interventions. These diesel Hiluxes regularly hit 500,000 miles in commercial use. The chassis was overbuilt to absurd levels. Fully boxed frame that could handle loads modern trucks would refuse on principle. Suspension components engineered for punishment that would make other vehicles weep. Leaf springs in the rear that could support weight distributions physics professors would question. Toyota's philosophy was refreshingly simple. No complicated four-wheel drive systems, no electronic nannies, no features that could fail in remote locations. Just manual locking hubs, a transfer case built like a bank vault, and differentials that treated abuse as foreplay. Today, clean 5th gen Hiluxes command premium prices in markets where they were sold. In the United States, where we got the less robust Tacoma, importers bring in right-hand drive Hiluxes because Americans finally figured out what the rest of the world already knew. These trucks are genuinely indestructible. Number 3. Lexus LS 400. In 1989, Toyota decided to do something audacious. Build a luxury car that would humiliate the Germans at their own game. Not just match them, demolish them. And the result was the LS 400, a car so obsessively engineered that Mercedes and BMW engineers probably cried into their schnitzel and bratwurst. Toyota didn't just throw money at the LS 400, they threw billions. The development cost exceeded what most automakers spent on entire model ranges. Engineers tested prototypes in Death Valley, the Arctic Circle, and the Autobahn. They logged millions of test miles before production even started. This wasn't car development, this was a religious crusade against imperfection. The 1UZ V8 engine is widely considered one of the best engines ever built, period. A 4.0-liter V8, producing 250 horsepower and smoothness that redefined what smooth meant. This engine was so perfectly balanced that engineers could stack champagne glasses on the valve cover while it idled and they wouldn't fall over. Try that with your Mercedes V8. The tolerances were absurd. Internal components were hand-selected and matched for balance. The crankshaft was night-righted for strength. The block was reinforced in places other manufacturers didn't know needed reinforcement. Toyota built this V8 like it was going into aircraft, not luxury sedans. Routine maintenance, oil changes, and timing belt replacements, and these engines ran 400,000 miles without major issues. There are documented cases of original LS400s with over 600,000 miles on original engines, still running smoothly, still whisper quiet, still making their original power. The transmission was a 4-speed automatic that shifted so smoothly you couldn't feel the gear changes. It just flowed seamlessly from standstill to highway speed like it was connected to infinite gears. These transmissions lasted the lifetime of the vehicle with nothing but fluid changes. But the real magic was in the details Toyota obsessed over. Every switch was tested for 100,000 cycles. The climate control system had its own microprocessor because apparently one wasn't enough. The paint was applied in 17 layers. Panel gaps were measured in tenths of millimeters and rejected if they weren't perfect. And here's the beautiful irony. While Mercedes and BMW were charging premium prices for cars that needed constant dealer visits, the LS400 just worked. No electrical gremlins, no mysterious warning lights, no expensive repairs every 60,000 miles. Just reliable, smooth, effortless luxury that made German reliability look like a cruel joke. Today, first-gen LS400s with high mileage sell for reasonable money because everyone knows they're still good for another 200,000 miles. Number 2. Honda Accord CB7. When Honda developed the CB CB7, they had one obsessive goal: build the perfect midsize sedan. Not the most powerful, not the flashiest, just flawless execution of fundamentals. And they succeeded so completely that Motor Trend named it Car of the Year. And 30 years later, clean examples are legitimate collector's items. The engine lineup was Honda's greatest hits collection. The F22 4-cylinder was agricultural in its simplicity and legendary in its reliability. This engine loved to rev, made adequate power, and refused to break even when neglect became art. But the real star was how these engines were built. Every component was over-engineered. Timing belts that should have lasted 60,000 miles routinely survived 100,000. Head gaskets that were designed as lifetime components actually were lifetime components. Oil consumption? Not in Honda's vocabulary during this era. The manual transmissions were benchmarks for the industry. Cable-actuated shifters with mechanical precision that made every gear change feel purposeful. Clutches that lasted 150,000 miles even in city traffic. Synchros that refused to wear out. Honda built these transmissions like they were personally offended by the concept of slop. And the automatics, normally the weak point of Japanese cars, were shockingly robust in the CB7. 4-speed units that shifted smoothly, held gears appropriately, and survived abuse that would grenade modern CVTs within 80,000 miles. Routine fluid changes and these transmissions lived forever. Honda's attention to build quality was borderline irrational. Panel gaps were measured and rejected if imperfect. Paint was thick and applied properly. The interior materials felt premium despite being in a mid-sized sedan. Switches clicked with authority. Dashboard rattles simply didn't exist even after 200,000 miles of backroad abuse. But here's what cemented the CB7's legendary status: longevity in real-world conditions. These Accords routinely hit 300,000 miles with nothing but routine maintenance. Original owners passed them down to children who drove them through college. Taxi drivers in developing countries chose them over everything else because they knew downtime meant lost income. The CB7 proved something important. Reliability and driving enjoyment aren't mutually exclusive. You could have a car that started every morning, returned excellent fuel economy, handled beautifully, felt quality in every interaction, and still be running strong at 250,000 miles. Number 1. Toyota Land Cruiser 80 Series. If automotive immortality had a physical form, it would be the 80 Series Land Cruiser. This isn't just the most reliable JDM vehicle ever built. This is the vehicle that redefined what reliability means. When the United Nations needs transportation in war zones, they buy Land Cruisers. When humanitarian organizations operate in the world's harshest environments, they choose Land Cruisers. When you absolutely positively need to get there and back, regardless of conditions, you buy an 80 Series. There's a reason for that. Toyota didn't design the 80 Series to be comfortable, though it was. They didn't build it to be fast, though it was adequately quick. They engineered it with one singular obsession: create a vehicle so indestructible that mechanical failure becomes a theoretical concept rather than a practical concern. And they succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. The heart of the legend is the 1FZ engine, a 4.5-liter inline-six that produced 212 horsepower and torque measured in yes. This engine was so overbuilt that normal operation felt like gentle exercise. The block was cast iron, thick enough to stop a small arms fire. The head was aluminum designed with enough material to rebuild twice. Internal components were dimensioned like they belonged in industrial equipment. Owners routinely report 400,000 miles on original engines with nothing but oil changes and timing belt replacements. The transmission options were both legendary. The 5-speed manual was agricultural but indestructible, shifting like farm equipment because it basically was farm equipment. The 4-speed automatic was slower than evolution but could survive abuse that would grenade modern transmissions within months. But the real magic was the 4-wheel drive system. Full-time 4-wheel drive with a lockable center differential, no computers, no electronic traction control, no complicated systems that fail in remote locations. Just mechanical brilliance that distributed power intelligently and could be overridden when necessary. Solid front and rear axles that treated rocks and obstacles as minor annoyances. The 80 Series proved that Toyota could build a vehicle that would survive anything. Not just off-road abuse, not just high mileage, but genuine battlefield conditions, environmental extremes, and maintenance schedules that consisted of whenever possible maybe.